Hello. Great. Hello, everyone. Thank you for being with us at the Immigrant and Refugee Affairs Forum today. We will be having discussion about the housing, the eviction off ramp, and what tenants' rights are and what information immigrant and refugee communities need to know in terms of resources or other access to legal aid and resources. But after that, we will also discuss about economic opportunities and grants and requests for proposals here at the Department of Employment and Economic Development. And I'd like to go ahead and welcome Director of Community Development at Minnesota Housing, Alyssa Wetzel-Moore. Alyssa, thank you so much for being here with us, and thank you for always being very resourceful. I know I always reach out to you when we have tenants that have been able to access resources, but sometimes because of language access, they may not understand where to go or who to communicate with. And Alyssa actually volunteered and reached out to really come to the forum and share this information so the communities can be aware of the change and what's happening. Go ahead, Alyssa. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Assistant Commissioner. It's nice to virtually be with all of you today, and I think I already wanted to make sure that our community members were aware of what we're calling the eviction off ramp that was passed in the legislature. But with what we've seen over the weekend, where the federal CDC moratorium is now gone, at least for now, to know that those protections are still existing in Minnesota. So what I'd like to do is just walk through what we're calling the eviction off ramp. What does that mean? We have a number of FAQs and timelines and things that have been translated, but then also another piece we're working to develop, hopefully by the end of this month, or maybe a little bit into September, are these 2-minute quick information videos that will be translated. So we're trying to figure out different ways of making this information accessible. So I'll just walk through the off-ramp and then get into some more details as I'm able. So what we're calling the eviction off-ramp, as many of you were aware, there was the eviction moratorium during the peacetime emergency that lasted from about March of 2020 through the governor's executive order. And then that was signed into law, and at which time the eviction, the moratorium ended. So the thinking behind the eviction moratorium off-ramp is this idea of it, right? If you think of coming up the freeway, rather than just ending and slamming into a wall, knowing that we're still waiting for all the applications to be paid through rent help and others, that there's really a gradual phasing out of the various protections, while at the same time allowing people the time they need to access the resources they need, making plans that they need. And so, again, this was a law that was passed by the Minnesota legislature and signed by Governor Walz. And so what it is there's a few key timelines I'll walk through, but then I'll also get into some of the common questions that we've been asked. So I'll go ahead and share my screen. I think sometimes it's easier to see it in this calendar format. Okay, one moment, please. Can you see my screen? Wonderful. So as you can see, on June 3rd, well, I'll step back. So a couple of things to keep in mind here. One thing we talk about is if you violate your lease, there's certain dates where somebody could be evicted. Another key piece is the difference between an eviction and not renewing a lease. The other thing to keep in mind is this 15-day notice requirement. So those are a few things I wanted to just highlight, and then I'll talk more as I walk through the timeline. So as of June 30th, if somebody materially violated their lease, other than not paying rent, their landlord could file an eviction. It would be required to give them a 15-day notice, and then they would be able to file the eviction and be evicted as of July 14th. The next piece to really think about is there's more protections if you have what's called a pending COVID emergency rental assistance application. So we have a statewide program that's also in partnership with some local cities and counties. Some local cities and counties, as well as tribal nations, have their own programs as well. So if you have applied for one of these and you have a pending application, that protects you for much longer. So as of August 13th, a renter's lease could be terminated if they have non-payment of rent and they're not eligible for COVID-19 rental assistance. And I'll talk about what that means. As of September 12th, a renter could be evicted if they have not paid their rent and are not eligible for COVID-19 rental assistance. So August 13th is lease termination, where they just say, you know what, your lease expired, we're not renewing it. September 12th would be eviction. The last kind of key date in this initial few months is October 12th. So all lease termination and eviction protections are lifted, except for eligible renters with pending COVID-19 rental assistance applications. And then finally, we know that people will continue to be applying for this rental assistance program, so that as of June 1st, 2020, all lease termination and eviction protections are lifted. And I know I've shared this with you, Assistant Commissioner, but I can follow up and reshare these documents. So this is enforced in the courts. You know, the eviction moratorium was enforced by the Attorney General's office. So a lot of this, you know, if somebody is getting an eviction filed against them and they think, you know what, I didn't materially violate my lease, you know, or, you know, there's all these potentially legal arguments. So we really do encourage renters that aren't sure what to do or how to proceed, or if they're being threatened with eviction, to reach out. We have lawhelpmn.org is a resource, but we often also like to refer people to Homeline, which is a free hotline for renters. It's available in multiple languages, and they give legal advice over the phone. And if you need more representation, again, there's different legal aids throughout the state that are available. And I know that the legal services agencies are coordinating because they understand there's going to be high demand for their support. So I'll stop sharing my screen, and I just wanted to talk through some of the terms that I mentioned. So some of the specific things are, well, what's a lease termination and what's an eviction? And I know I mentioned that, but a lease termination is just given to the household saying that the tenancy is ending. So it's not going to show up on your report, but you know, if you had a year lease that expired, often that'll switch to month. So there's certain rules about how much notice before the lease is terminated. The eviction is when the landlord takes the renter to court to force them to give up the property. And that could appear on the screening report and in court file records unless it's expunged. The other piece, right, there's a lot of mention of what does it mean, you know, you're protected if you are eligible and have a pending application. So that eligibility is determined when the application is being processed. There's a lot of things, you know, we have basic outline of eligibility is you have to be a renter in Minnesota, have a household income that's under 80% of the area median income, and that's the average income per county. That there's been some COVID impacts, and that's interpreted pretty broadly. We know almost everyone has had some kind of impact and could be at risk of housing instability. But there's different calculations within this that on its face, it might look like you might be ineligible, but you could be eligible. So again, that's a program determination. And then the other piece is, you know, what is a notice requirement? So a landlord needs to provide notice in writing at least 15 days before they file an eviction action for non-payment of rent. So it should state the household could be subject to eviction, list the amount they owe, and then the contact information for the renthelpmn.org and 211. And then the other big piece, well, what does it mean to have a pending application? Our interpretation as an agency, again, this could go to court, but our position is if you hit submit on that application, that then your rental assistance application is pending. So that is something we would really love your help getting the word out. You know, if someone has opened up or started an application but hasn't hit that submit button, then that application is not yet pending. So we do encourage people to make sure that they have submitted the application and that it hasn't been denied, withdrawn, or paid. There is the option to reapply as more back rent is accrued. So this pending status could kind of be changing. It might not be a one-time status. And then the other pieces, you know, we have in our FAQs that I wanted to highlight is if a renter submits an application, but the landlord hasn't participated in the process, the renter can still be paid directly, and they could use that money to then pay the landlord. Again, if you think, questions about whether or not the law is being followed, again, Homeline is a good resource, and I'll provide that information. If someone is behind on the rent and they don't want to apply for the rental assistance, then they could be evicted as early as, that process could be started. And then again, if somebody is denied, they do have, and their circumstances change, let's say they lose their job, they do have the option to reapply. So those are just some of the kind of frequently asked questions that we have wanted to talk through. I'll just take a quick look. I didn't really dig into the Rent Help MN program itself. I know that you've been sharing information, but I'm happy to kind of walk through a few other pieces. Let's see. So I'm not seeing any questions, but I did want to just talk through a few other common questions that we hear about are where, application status. We know that it's been taking quite a bit of time to process and pay out the applications. So I just wanted to walk through where you can check that. If you go to your renthelpmn.org and you click the apply button, then it'll take you to a check my status window. So if you access your online application, you can see that status. You can also call 211 if it's difficult to have access to technology or difficult to use it. 211 first call for help can also check your application status. Landlords can see the status of any renter that is linked to their properties. We also like to share that applications are processed by real people who have to verify all of the information as a federal requirement. And during the process, they will contact the renter if any information is missing or incomplete, as well as the landlord. That does add to the processing time, but there is that opportunity to correct. We know that people are anxious, not only to get the resources they need, but also with the off-ramp in place now. We still encourage people to take the time to submit a complete application. It does help the process go quickly, because once you hit submit, you can't make changes until the application processor reaches back out to ask for more information, and then you submit it. To the extent possible, we really do encourage landlords and renters to work together, because we've seen some confusion where landlords try to start a process that a renter has already started, and that kind of slows down the process. So then I see your question about, can you work backward when you hit submit? How does that protect you? So when you submit your application, that is considered a pending application, and you need a pending application to be protected from eviction for non-payment of rent. So a common question is, well, how do I prove that or document that? We're working on other ways to send this information out, but it is available on the online application system, where if you log into the kind of dashboard, there will be a document that says, yes, you have applied. So there are ways to substantiate that you do have a pending application. I'll see if there's any other questions here.
Alyssa, could you share the link that people can go and to apply, and also mention what languages have been translated into the like flyers and information communities need to know, especially language access challenges and whatnot?
Yes. So the application itself has been translated into Hmong, Somali, and Spanish. The frequently asked questions on the website are also in Spanish, Somali, and Hmong. We really appreciate some of our partners have also translated them in Oromo, Amharic, Vietnamese, Russian. And so I'll make sure to get you all of those. Do you want me to put them in the chat, or would you like me to send them to you as a follow-up?
Oh, sorry. I do have the Oromo, Russian, and Hmong. So, the other ones, I think I have it somewhere. We can actually download it and then include it into the resources. But the link for people to go on and apply. Oh, there it is. Okay, great. So that's the one that they would go on for the application. And is that one only applicable when an eviction has been filed?
Oh, so this is at any time. This is the applicate for assistance. You can apply. We just know time can be of the essence if an eviction has notice has applied. But the eviction notice does have to refer people to this resource. And then I'm seeing a question about renters being told by their landlords that their leases won't be renewed because they've applied for rental assistance in the past. I think that would be a question for legal providers or legal services organizations. I think, but at least during the time period of the calendar I showed you, that leases can't be terminated until for non-payment of rent, as long as there is this pending application. But as of October 12th, the lease termination is lifted. That makes sense. Yeah, sorry, Michelle. I think that's another question for legal providers. So again, it's somewhat short. I just wanted the chance to talk through and kind of answer any questions. As always, really encourage people to call 211 if they need help. Go to the website. I should also say we have what's called a field partner network of organizations that are trusted community hubs that are from the community, speak the language, are from the cultures. And so we don't have a direct access just because of their capacity. But if people are really struggling, when they call 211 to ask for help, a referral to the field partner, because they can provide a lot more assistance, step by step, all those kinds of pieces. Let's see, any other questions? Otherwise, I'm happy to move on to the next speaker.
Thank you so much, Alyssa. Yeah, if anybody has a question, please put in the chat box or raise your hand. The other thing I was going to say is that we will include it in the blog too, the legal aid offices, just to make it easier, that offer housing legal services. So that way people can call. Many times we've seen people that communicated with our office asking for, they live in Ramsey County right now, but their case, they moved from Hennepin County and they were communicated with, Southern Minnesota Regional Legal Services, and then they were sent to Minnesota Legal Services. So that had been some sort of a confusion that they would have to seek legal advice through the county where they have the case. So we'll include those resources and communication, contact information, and an intake line number within the blog that we're going to publish hopefully by Thursday, if not Monday. Excellent. But if you have any additional question, please either email me or, Alyssa, if you feel comfortable, you could put your contact information there so people can reach out to you. And Alyssa is always available to us whenever she has time to really help out and come to the forum and share resources and information.
And I just thought, I thought of one more thing. A common question, I think, especially that we've received from immigrant and refugee committees, communities is, I don't have the cookie cutter W-2 or the formal lease agreement. How do I show that? And so we do have a number of, and I'll put those in the chat, but also later, what we're calling attestations. So you can fill out a form to say, you know what, my identification here's the link to the form. Unfortunately, these are in English at that time, but at least there's this ability to show alternate documentation, consulate documents, matriculas. Those are things that should be accepted, and we're working with the application processors to recognize and understand what those are. So that's just one other thing I wanted to make sure to point out. So I'll stick around just off camera if there's any other questions, but I'll pass it back to you.
Thank you so much, Alyssa. I really appreciate it. And then now we're going to move on to Maureen Ramirez, my colleague, director of Office of Economic Opportunities here at DEED, who will be presenting or having interactive discussion, of course, about economic opportunities that immigrants and refugees can access. Go ahead, Maureen. Thank you for being here today.
Oh, thank you, Anissa. Hi, everybody. I'm Maureen, and I know you've seen me before if you've been here before. So thank you, Anissa. I'm going to share my screen. Yes. Let me just, sorry. Am I allowed? I thought that I was.
Yeah.
Oh, there it is. I'm sorry. I was wrong spot. Okay. What I want to do is give a short overview of and I apologize for my dog. So I'm trying to do two things at once. All right, let me go to my PowerPoint and let me go to this. Okay, you can see it? All right. Let me do that. Okay. What I want to talk about is some of the economic development legislation that got passed by the state at the end of the last legislative session. If you remember, that was the end of June. And so we have a little bit more information about what's available for small businesses, what will be available later in this summer and early in next fall. So I'll go through that a little bit and then we can do questions. And so, again, we're going to talk about the economic development side of our agency. And as you can imagine, the whole agency has been busy on the economic development side since the start of the pandemic. From different legislation that got passed, we have given out about $300 million for businesses. That's across the whole state and across deed. And what some of the counties have done and what some of the Department of Revenue has done. So that's just big picture since the start of the pandemic. Again, in the big picture, that's assisted more than 22,000 businesses. And then just this year, so in this session, $285 million got passed for economic development programs. And that is between 4 and 5 times bigger than what would be a normal year. And of course, we're not in a normal year, but that is good news. That is money that we will be distributing out and into businesses and communities. And so demand is increasing, but the funds are increasing too, but it makes for a very busy time for us at DEED, and we want to connect with you a little bit about what is available. So there's a lot of numbers on this slide, but again, in the big picture in this current year, we call the current year the fiscal year of 2022, but that is what we mean for spending starting this year right now. Well, it's August now, but starting July of this year to July of 2022, there is $285 million to spend that will go into small business, well, not all small businesses, but that will go into business and economic development. And then we know we have committed $88 million to economic development programs for the next year, was already decided on too. But if you're also following what's happening, there is still additional federal funding coming into the state, and that will get decided on this winter, and that will be a whole different presentation and a different set of programs. But let's talk about this $285 million in economic development that's going to be spent in this current year. So some of that funding goes into our business finance programs. And what's most relevant on this slide is to look at the Emerging Entrepreneur Loan Program. So that is a loan program that will get $1 million in each year, and that we share and distribute that money, that $1 million, to lending institutions across the state. So think about community development financial institutions where they make the loan to the business, and then the state provides the funds to make that loan happen. But this is good news for the Emerging Entrepreneur Loan Program because this program targets businesses that might be owned by Black, Indigenous, or people of color, owned by women, veterans, people with disabilities. And so certainly there are folks in the immigrant refugee community who might be entrepreneurs. So this is more of a startup phase. People building their business would have some eligibility there. That's probably the most relevant for this slide. Also for startups and kind of innovation and tech companies, our Launch Minnesota program continued its funding, and so we'll stay. They built like hubs across the state that are helping tech entrepreneurs and other folks doing scalable businesses. So the innovation sort of tech startup people that you know can get connected to Launch Minnesota, and they do education and support, and then also grant money to help folks in their business startups. And now let's talk about the availability of relief for small businesses. There are 4 different programs that got funded from the legislature. Their names all sound a little bit similar, so I'll go through. We're going to talk mostly about the first 2 on here. So $80 million for a Main Street revitalization program and $70 million for a Main Street business relief program. We'll talk mostly about those 2 because that's what's coming up right now in August and September. And then I'll briefly describe what the partnership grants are and the childcare grants. But the Main Street Revitalization Program, this will open up this month in August. The people who should apply to the Main Street Revitalization Program are organizations that are a foundation or a community development finance institution or a community development corporation. So you probably know these organizations. I mean, you know the foundations around town, right? Something maybe like the Minneapolis Foundation or the McKnight Foundation. CDFIs and CDCs like the Latino Economic Development Center or Neighborhood Development Center, MEDA, maybe NEON, maybe those are some groups, the African Development Center, some groups that you know. So this program is targeted for those groups. So if you're a small business owner, or if you're a city or anyone who's not a foundation or CDFI or CDC, not yet for this program. But if you're a foundation or a CDFI or a CDC, right now in August, we will open up applications for this program. And what the program does is it, again, and this is a lot of times how the state works, is the state money from our agency, we give it out to the foundation or the CDFI or the CDC, and then they give it out to the small business, right? So it's like a 2-step process. So right now we're asking foundations, CDFIs, and CDCs to, to learn more about the program and then decide if they want to apply for it. And so this is really targeted to do some cleanup in some commercial corridors. If you are following any of the conversation at the legislature, you might know that Minneapolis and St. Paul both were asking for some funding for rebuilding in the corridors that were affected by the arson and the unrest and the last summer, right? And instead of making a very specific program for those neighborhoods, the state passed instead kind of a larger program so any community can take advantage of these funds. So that's what this is. And so we have, and I think that Anissa can share some of this information afterwards, but again, this will start up later this month, pretty soon. The request for proposals will open up and we'll have an information session to give more details. But again, in this round, this is for the applications for only if you're a foundation or a CDC or a CDFI. Once the foundations and CDFIs and CDCs do an application with us, get approved to be part of this program, then those organizations will have the funding that the small businesses or the city or whatever entity can apply to those organizations to get that money out the door for the rebuilding and the revitalization. So that's just to let you know it's happening and that the second step of that process is the small business step. Now, the more direct small business relief has maybe kind of a similar name, but it's called the Main Street Business Relief Program. So this is where if you are a small business owner in Minnesota, if you have been affected by the pandemic, that you could be eligible for these grants that will be available starting in fall of 2021. And by fall, we think September. So this is that the state has $70 million, and we will distribute that $70 million to small business owners in a range of sizes of grants between $10,000 and $25,000, depending on the size of the business. Some of you might remember that last year we had a small business relief grant program. It was last summer, right around, July. It was last summer in July. There was a second round of it in December. And there was a very short application process. And then the grant awards were made by lottery. So if you remember that from last year, this is the new version of that for this year, where again, the grant awards are made by lottery. So you'll fill out a short application. It's a little bit different. It will be a little longer than the application was last year, with a few more questions on it, and questions asking you about the impact on your business from COVID-19. But you'll fill that out, submit it to our agency. All that happens online. And then we run a lottery program, which then awards the funding, which again come in grants, so you don't have to pay them back. So because we've done this 2 times before, there are businesses out there that have already received a small business relief grant from us, and the priority for this summer or this fall for these grants will be for any business that has not already, right? Priority is given to folks to try to spread this money out. There is also priority in here, so remember that it's going to happen by a lottery, and so the lottery will be divided up and will draw for businesses owned by Black or Indigenous or people of color, businesses owned by women, and businesses owned by veterans. And then there also will be set aside out of that 70 million, some funding for the cultural malls. And that also happened last year, if you remember some of that. So a few other changes from last year to this year in the way the small business relief grant will work. Last year, to be considered that your ownership was either of a Black or Indigenous or person of color or a woman, it was that you had to be 51% owned by that person or that identity. And that just got changed to 50-50 because I know some businesses that were owned by 2 people, right? And they each own 50% of the business. Last year might not have been eligible. This year can be eligible. So that's one change. The number of employees that you can have as a small business is now 200. So that I think that increased, and some self-employed businesses are eligible that were not eligible last year. So you don't have to remember any of that right now. What you can remember is that that in September, the application portal for this should open, and by the middle of August, we're aiming for the middle of August, maybe the last part of August. We will have more of the materials developed that will help you understand who's eligible and how to do the application. And we are working on getting as much of that information translated. Right now, we're looking at Spanish, Somali, Hmong, and maybe Vietnamese. In trying to produce some materials so that we have a better chance to share all this information in more languages and that we can get this out earlier before the application opens up. Because if you also remember last year, and this is when Anissa just started and she was new, we did this all very fast. And we have a little more time this year and a little more experience doing it. So we're trying to produce more materials that can be more helpful. Okay, so the small business relief, sorry about my dog, relief grant is should have the widest audience for small businesses. So here's a third program, a small business partnership program. This is again targeting nonprofit organizations or CDFIs or CDCs or any kind of a organization. Here we're calling them an entrepreneurial support organization. Anyone who does work supporting Minnesota businesses, small businesses, and entrepreneurs. So this is really a grant so that those organizations can do more technical assistance. They can provide more services to entrepreneurs and people in business. This should be coming out. This says released in mid-August. So again, though, this is not directly for the businesses, it's for the organizations that can provide the assistance to help them out. And then we got additional funding for childcare grants because, as you probably know, I certainly know, even though my kids are older now, but right, childcare is a real issue for working Minnesotans and making sure folks can be in the workforce. And so there's additional funding that will get spread out across the state to help go into providing and increasing childcare providers. So again, you should see more details about this for the fall of 2021. Again, fall you can think of as kind of September, and we've done this before. DEED has had grant funds before for childcare funding. This is just an increase. And then one more program that also later in the fall will get rolled out. This is another kind of grant, a targeted community capital grant for development projects. Again, the folks who could apply for this would be a nonprofit or a government entity, maybe a city or something like that. And these are development, I think they're real estate projects. So again, later in the fall, we're developing the RFP and sort of what this will look like. So it's, again, sorry about that, not ready yet, but will be available. But again, not directly for small businesses, for nonprofits and government entities. All right, I'm going to, sorry. Okay, that's all I have, Anita.
Maureen, I think he just wants you to hold him.
Let me just deal with him. I'll be right back. But that is the end of my session. I will stop sharing my screen. All right. I'm gonna go run him out of the room and
sure.
Yeah, you hold for a minute and then I can answer questions.
Okay, yeah. Thank you so much, Maureen. And while you do that, I was gonna say, if anyone has questions, please go ahead and either raise your hand or type it in the chat box.
Okay, I'm back. So I know it was maybe a little bit long and maybe a little bit complex, but we're super grateful to the forum as a good place to share information. Later in August is when we'll have the more details about the small business relief grant, which again should be the easiest and that we want the most small business owners to apply for. We'll be providing some translations of some of that material and as much like toolkits, as much as we can provide that will help people know what they need to fill out, what information about their business they need to fill out in order to be eligible.
Thank you, Maureen.
But I'll just add there were not any citizenship or kind of questions like that about business ownership. The business needs to be located in Minnesota, but there were not other requirements or questions like that. So business owners are eligible, and business owners whose businesses were impacted by COVID. So it's a little tricky, like folks that are brand new or maybe weren't as impacted may not be eligible because you are supposed to demonstrate that you've had an impact to your business because of COVID.
What would be some of the things that they can, small businesses can demonstrate, show that they've been impacted by the pandemic?
Last year, I believe there was a certain percentage change in their, well, two things, certain percentage change in their business, and businesses were given priority that were specifically the named businesses during the different shutdowns, like hair salons and restaurants and those things. That level of detail is what we'll know later in August, and we'll try to have ways that we can be telling people what they should demonstrate, what they should do.
Great. And I see, thank you so much, Maureen. Michelle Rivero put in the chat box a link to this presentation would be fantastic. If we have this regular meeting on our calendar, will we automatically receive the link afterwards? This is all great information. Thank you so much. And also, what kind of ID number will the small businesses need to provide, like EIN and not social security number? Yeah, that's really important information to know. And Maureen, if you want to mention, you're going to be convening the community calls again, and some of the conversations will also be covered as well.
Yes, that's a good point. Maybe not this week, but maybe in the next 2 weeks. So we'll have kind of a weekly thing. What's also going to happen is that from our economic development team, they will start hosting weekly office hours, probably around the middle of August, and we can make sure to connect this group with that number as well. So you could ask questions directly to Kevin. To Michelle's question, what kind of ID is requested? I went to go look at last year's application, which I don't see that specific question. So when the application itself is available, then we can answer that. But what happens is that we ask, the business applies online with Deed. Deed does the lottery, picks out the names of the businesses, sort of checks some of their checks their eligibility, but also works with one of the CDFIs to help give out the money. And so there's also a step in there where the CDFI and their administering paperwork sort of comes in handy. But anyway, those are more steps. But Michelle, we can get that information. The application last year did not even ask those questions. It just sort of was name, address of business, business registration, stuff like that, which Anissa remembers, which is not part of this year. This other registration piece of last year is not like this year. So there's some changes, but we'll try to get as much information out as we can. I'm just trying to give you a sense that the team over there, the economic development team, is working to get these out into the world, right? They have to take the legislation when it was finally passed at the end of June, take some time, read through it, what it says, then develop the process. So they're doing that. I would love if you would have a little time, maybe somewhere between 10 and 15 minutes of your September forum, Anissa. We could probably address the stuff should be out, so I could come back and we could address a couple more questions, a couple more specifically, and share with folks.
Oh, I was on mute. Thanks, Maureen. So yeah, great. September, 10, 15 minutes should work. And then are there any links to Michelle's point to include either in the blog or share the PowerPoint presentation or any other resources?
Yes, let me link to the well, okay, the small business grant portion is not up yet on the website. I will link to the economic revitalization part of it because that is up and available. We will also do very specific webinars on the small business relief grant, on the application itself and the process. We will do multiple webinars, and we're looking at doing them in different languages as well. So so folks will be able to hear, we can use this forum, but you'll hear more of it too. But so not yet on the small business stuff, but I'll put the economic revitalization in there.
Okay, thank you so much. And Michelle and Edmundo, thank you so much for clarifying that. Yes, I'll share the YouTube link of this once it's posted. Okay. Eric said, question from the web, though I think it was posted on a fake pattern. Let's see. Let me see if I can click and see what that question is. Let me know, Maureen, if you can.
Yeah, I can see it.
Great.
Thank you, Eric. Yes, question about when will the information for small business grants be posted later in August? And the answer is yes, that's what we're aiming for. I can't give you a hard date or a promise, but my meeting right before this one was talking about that. And so yes, we're trying to get that out because with that applications will open in September and we want to give people a chance ahead of time to see what it will be.
Thank you, Maureen. And if you could touch on some of the community calls, I know a lot of people had reached out that oftentimes participate in this forum and wanted to know more about the community calls. What are the topics or discussions covered in the community calls?
Well, I can tell you about last year. And then, so we're on a pause of the community calls right now. So I haven't, kind of in the summer, I haven't been hosting them, but was thinking of bringing them back. So the topics are kind of wide open, although with all the grants that are going out, and I know Marc will be here to talk about the workforce development side of grants. We just will have some content about that. So during the pandemic, I have been hosting a 4 o'clock call weekly. First, we started at 3 times a week. Then we went back to 2 days a week. And then towards last spring, we were 1 day a week. A lot of that information that we gave out was about unemployment insurance. If you just remember, the programs were changing and being added to, and that was good and helpful. But then things would run out and then they'd come back. And it just seemed there was a lot of moving parts about unemployment insurance, business closures and shutdowns. I think Alyssa came and probably talked about housing. I know folks on this call helped organize some of those specific for UI questions for immigrant and refugees. So they were mostly deed related and then sometimes other topics as well. And maybe next week, maybe the week after, we'll try to get those back on the calendar and see if I can get better organized and we can have a schedule of like what the topic for the call will be. But they were kind of simple ways to connect with people. And what I will say that reminded me, and I know Marc can't join us till probably 4 o'clock, reminded me, Anissa, that the extended unemployment insurance benefits are in place until September 4th or September 5th. So you will see some information coming out from DEED in the next couple weeks to help continue to help people connect to job seeker resources. But if you remember, what's currently in place is that the federal government is giving an additional $300 a week in unemployment insurance benefits. So whatever you qualify for, if you're currently unemployed, you're not able to work, whatever you qualify for, everyone is getting an additional $300 a week. And that's been in place since, I think, January. And that is scheduled to run out that first week of September. So that's just, it's federal legislation, and that was the time frame that it had. And so we're getting towards the end of that. I don't have a good sense of what Congress is doing or if there's been any conversation about extending it. That would be for Congress. That would be a federal conversation. It wouldn't, or there isn't a conversation about that or anything on the state level, but that's just so folks know, right, that will have a big impact on the resources and the relief that's been available. It has been so handy, right? And lets people continue to buy their groceries and pay for their housing or anything else they're doing. But DEED is preparing some materials and then some added initiatives to, again, keep helping to connect folks into jobs.
Thank you so much, Maureen. And looks like I see there's just a communication that came in about the Minnesota Main Street Economic Revitalization Program. Is that some of the presentation that you'll be making, Maureen?
That was the first program I talked about, which is the one where if you're a foundation or a community development finance institution, or if you're a CDC, that you can apply for this funding. This is kind of the rebuilding funding for the like streets, corridors across the state of Minnesota. It's, yes, I think it is the first program from economic development that has its RFP open. So that's just opening right now. Oh yes, you know what Brandon said? I think by like 2 o'clock today is when it was going to get posted. So that was the first one, but that is only, the application process is just for the organizations to be that like pass-through organization where they get the state money and then they are the ones providing those state funds to the different projects. So got to hold tight still for the small business relief grants.
Right, and I see that the people like Minnesota foundations, nonprofits, and communities can join for additional information sessions on Thursday, August 5th at 11 and Thursday, August 12th at 11. And we will include that in the blog as well. Looks like anyone with any questions or additional follow-up information. And Maureen, if you're okay with people who would like to join in the community calls, if you could put your contact information so that way they can reach out to you and be included in the list. Because it's one of the ways to really receive information and share with your networks and community members, community leaders, and organizations. And that way it's easier to have that connection.
Yeah, and just like we were saying, right, between the small business activities that the agency is doing, the unemployment insurance, the job seeker activities, and then what you'll have Marc come and talk about, the workforce training. Yeah, we have a lot of ground to cover. And so if that's a helpful way to get the information out, then yes, we'll be back at it.
Great, thank you so much, Maureen. And I see Marc Majors had joined us already. I really appreciate all of you today for being here with us, and it's really important. Hey, Marc, thank you for joining us. We were hoping we're not going to see you until 4 o'clock, but thank you for being here earlier. And everyone, Marc Majors is the Director for Employment and Training Program, and a DEED, and he's also recently been one of the PIPOC people to know in 2021, PIPOC executives. So congratulations again, and thank you for being here with us. And Marc is going to talk to us about the employment and training programs and grants and requests for proposals. So welcome.
Oh, well, thank you, Assistant Commissioner. Really appreciate the introduction. It's very kind of you, and I appreciate the acknowledgement too. Pleasure to be here. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Marc Majors. I'm the Director of Employment and Training Programs here at DEED. We oversee both federal and state workforce development funds, and we disseminate those funds throughout the state of Minnesota. Been here for about 2.5 years, and Minnesota is my home, though this is the first time I actually really lived in Minnesota as an adult. So I'm glad to be back home, my home state, and delivering services. So as the Assistant Commissioner I mentioned, we are in a great time here with workforce development. On our federal funds, we just received our federal allocations back in April. And then as a result of the session that just ended on the state level, we received our state allocations. So for our state allocations, that pot of funding, I'll go very quickly, and then you all can ask questions, comes out what's called the Workforce Development Fund. That has been around for the late 80s. And those funds trickle down essentially to our team, part of our team here at ETP. And then we disseminate them through a competitive process out to the community. In this last session, there was approximately about $74 million that was went through the Workforce Development Fund that for over a 2-year period. Of that, about $30 million has been set aside for competitive grants. There's some the additional funding was direct appropriations and some other grant programs and other agencies like Department of Labor standards, and then some internal other deed programs. So what do we have in terms of the $30 million for competitive grants? So what that covers is our Pathways to Prosperity grants, our Women Economic Securities Act grants, our Supportive Services grants, our Youth at Work grants, our Southeast Asian grants, and a new one I'm super excited about, which is our African Immigrant Community Grant. So generally what we will do is we'll let RFPs, in fact, just last week, we let the RFPs for the Pathways to Prosperity Southeast Asian grant, as well as the African Immigrant grant. And those were released on, I believe, Tuesday or Wednesday of last week, and they have a due date in about 45 days. The grant funding is for a 2-year period, and we are looking for as many folks to submit grants as we possibly can get. We're trying to get the word out, and I appreciate this venue to talk about these grants and to get the word out so we can get new providers and new partnerships. So quick overview on the Pathways to Prosperity. I'll do a quick overview on all of these real quick. Pathways to Prosperity is a grant that came about 6 years ago from the legislature, and the whole idea is to get more folks into the workforce. And we deal with, and the way we set it up this year was a little bit different from the past. We created on-ramps program, so that working with individuals who may need a little bit addition to get prepared to get into the workforce. We created a bridge program, which is also a program that's really kind of cohort based, and it's really focused on our 5 main industries. And then finally, one, this is kind of new this year, is an individual training account. And that's really looking at individuals who are trying to kind of upskill themselves. So a lot of folks who may be, maybe in entry level jobs, they may be coming out of college, or they may, be driving for an Uber and things like that, and they may want to upskill their skill set. This is an opportunity to take that funding and use it for something very prescribed for themselves versus kind of the cohort based. So we're excited about that. In addition, as I spoke earlier, is we have the Women's Economic Security Act program, which is a RFP funding goes out to groups that are working obviously to help women move into the workforce or upskill into the workforce. This is very successful. I think it's one of our most successful in terms of placements programs that are in the portfolio, where we think our average placement is around $20 an hour and up. And then again, our Southeast Asian grants have been very directed. This is a repeat that we've seen in previous grant cycles, looking at how to best serve the Southeast Asian community. And so that those grants are very particular there. And then this is a new one, which we're really excited about, again, is African Immigrant Community Grants. And again, it runs along the same lines as the Southeast Asian grant. It's really to provide service to the African immigrant community. And this is something that we're looking forward to gain a lot of grant proposals on. And as we know our community is spread across the entire state, and there are great needs. And so the more applications make it a lot more, create more opportunities to serve more folks. And then we have our supported services grant, which is tied to our training programs, which means that if you're doing training, the supported services, as we all know, are very important, are there to help our participants move through training and into employment. We've divided it up this year. Than we've done, which we didn't do in the past. We put half the money towards our youth portfolio and then half the money towards our adult portfolio, just to create some more equity there. And then lastly is our Youth at Work grant. That RFP actually went out back in February because it was really looking at how we could best serve our youth in the summer. And so as soon as that money was given to us by the legislature, we were in a process of actually just entering into contracts. So that is pretty much our funding cycles. We do have a few more that I won't too much detail because those will come in the coming months of some RFPs we will be letting, and we can make sure this group is aware of it. And I'll be glad if you're going to host something else again, Assistant Commissioner, will be glad to come back and speak about those. The way we do operate though is we lead from a lens of equity. Our goal is to really advance our BIPOC community here in Minnesota. I'm sure many of you have heard over if you've listened to any of the speeches from our Deputy Commissioner Warfa and even Commissioner Grove, is our growing immigrant population, our growing BIPOC community is the future workforce in Minnesota. I think I've heard statistics like about 20 years, 70% of the workforce will be BIPOC. And now is the time to start preparing that workforce and getting it. We're actually behind, I would argue, but then now is the time to really kind of push and preparing that workforce to meet the needs of our employers. In some cases, it's going to be quick, short-term training. In some cases, it's going to be longer-term training, but now is the time. So their investment in the way we're moving forward is with that equity lens. Second is on performance. We really are looking for programs that are going to deliver services and get people prepared. And so we're going to be looking at the performance of organizations. So we're making sure that we're funding organizations that are actually where the folks that are training are ready to go to work. So that will be the second thing. And then, of course, our other lens is transparency. We want to be transparent about our process. And then lastly, our process is also, the commissioner says, the velocity. So prior to me coming on board, we kind of were slow to getting our grants out the door for various reasons. Now we are on a timetable. The money was released, given to us by the legislature in July, and we'll be in place with, I would say, argue 90% of the funding will be in grant by December, maybe 100. But usually I'll say 90. And the reason why we're on such a fast track is we know U.S. providers out there who want to serve folks. We want to get their money into your hands, and we want to get the money out so that you can start serving folks. And so the sooner that we can get that done, get into grants and get the funding to you, the quicker you can serve folks. So our team is fast tracking. You'll notice that these RFPs are coming out and they're due back in 45 days. And then we're turning them around within 60 days to get folks into grant situations. So, and then the last thing I'll say, then I'll open it up for questions, Assistant Commissioner, is that we are also looking for community reviewers. A big part of this process of reviewing RFPs is to get input from the community. A lot of folks have, you may know, the ears are closer to the ground. They know what the services are needed. They know the individuals who need services. And so we have a whole process, and I'm not sure if Maureen spoke about it, but we have a whole process where we're looking for community reviewers. So I invite, and we can get you the link to that to find out more information about that. I invite you all to participate, or if you know folks who may be interested in participating, to please join us in reviewing these RFPs. The input and the voices, which usually are not at the table for helping with some of these thoughts around RFPs, is really needed. And so definitely welcome. And I believe in our case with our funding, there's a little stipend that's tied to it. Nominal, but it's a little bit stipend. So I hope that sweetens the pot a little bit for people to participate. So thank you for your time. Really appreciate the opportunity to be here. I know it went through it very quickly. I could put the link to the RFPs in the chat if you like, so that folks can see, but I'll stop and see if there are questions.
Thank you so much, Mark. And I see Maureen had posted the link to the community reviewers. We also shared some of these resources and how people can apply last month. And again, please go ahead and apply if you like, or share these resources with somebody that might be interested in becoming a community reviewer. And any questions for Mark?
I know I stay in people's way between now and going on to have their meal for the afternoon, but
Yeah. Yeah, I don't see any question at all, but definitely, okay, it looks like Denise has her hand up. Denise, go ahead, please. Oh, thank you, Eric.
Thank you. I'm struggling over here. I can't type my question and then I couldn't talk. So my question was like, if I, working at an organization, wanted to be a reviewer, would in any possibility be a conflict of interest as we might be applying ourselves?
hey Denise, thanks for the question, and I too, I get challenged sometimes working through these too. So we're all in the same space a lot of times. Yes, you should apply, and there are about 3 questions that are part of the process that you'll see when you go in, and you'll identify where you work, and then also you get a chance to say where what you would like to review, whether it's adult, dislocated, or adult or youth portfolio RFPs. And so that will help us with trying to decide where we're going to put you. So the key piece is to make sure you let us know what organization you're working for, and then that will help us with the conflict of interest piece. But so that should not deter you though, just because you work with a community-based organization. We can figure that out on our side. So thanks for the question.
Thank you.
Thank you. And Mark, thank you. I see Jude had posted his question in the chat box. Thanks for your presentation. How does DEED plan to engage African heritage community members to know about the grant and prepare to participate?
Sure. Thanks for the question. It was Jude, correct?
Yeah.
Thanks, Jude. So what we've done is we've actually had almost 6 community engagement sessions, which we started back in end of April. We did them weekly. Deputy Commissioner Hamza Warfa and myself and Maureen and Kirk Kosho have did these presentations, and I think we had almost about 300 to 400 participants in those presentations. In addition, we've advertised the process through our communications department here at DEED about the different grants. And I know that even the deputy commissioner, as he's gone out, I've just heard about this today, is he's gone out and started speaking about this as he goes into communities and talk about the grant process. If you have questions, or if you know organizations that you feel would be interested in these grants, please let us know, and we'd be glad to share. There's a website, and I can get that to you as well, Assistant Commissioner, where questions are being asked, very specific. Today, let me take a step back. Today, we actually did what we call our webinars, or I would call them bidders conferences, for P2P, Southeast Asian, as well as African immigrant grants. So we have very direct links where folks can actually ask questions to my team, and we have to actually, because of the RFPs are officially out, we will have to post the questions and respond to them. and we usually will respond in about 48 hours to those questions, so that those individuals who are interested in participating can see what those questions are, and no one has an unfair advantage to actually answering questions. So we can get those links to you. But if you think that there's a group or organizations that you think that may be interested or should at least would like to see them, I would say you have the link there in the chat. Feel free to share that with them, or you can send myself or the assistant commissioner a note, and we'll be glad to share the link with them as well.
Thank you, Marc. And I see Michelle posted a question. Could you briefly speak to language accessibility, enabling people to know about and fully participate in process, including being community reviewers?
Let me see if I can see that question. Okay, can you say one? All right, so I'm assuming the language access question is more, are the RFPs in multiple language? Am I interpreting that correctly?
In the community reviewers, Marc, I'd be happy to.
Oh, okay, it's community. Okay,
Answer
Maureen,
it.
go ahead.
Yeah, if you want. Hi, thanks, Michelle. The community review process is the review process is in English. And right now that's one of the requirements to be a reviewer is, that you have some internet access, that you live in Minnesota, and that you can read and do it in English. So I'm afraid that's not language accessible in other languages, but it's where we are right now because that's I think the mechanics of having it available in multiple languages would get hard for review capabilities and just all the rest of the work and the ongoing work for grants management throughout the year. So it's an English process.
Because the proposals are in English.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. Okay. All right. Thank you, Maureen, for clarifying. Marc, I thought for a moment my volume was too low that you couldn't hear me. So, okay.
No, I was trying to make sure I had a full question there.
Yeah.
Thanks, Maureen. Answer.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you, Maureen. Any other comments or questions? Sam has his hand up. Sam, go ahead, please.
You may be on mute, Sam.
Yeah, he's mute. Eric, what was it that he was gonna
Okay, I think you can hear me now.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah, I do have a question. First of all, I think I was struggling. I think between from 3:30 to 4 o'clock, I think I missed a lot because I think we're having some problems with my iPad here, so I was kicked out here. But my question I want to ask is regard to the community review.
Sam, I'm sorry to cut you off, but could you speak up a little, please?
Yeah, I'd
We're having a hard time hearing you.
Okay, you can hear me now. So basically what I'm asking is the community review education grant, opportunities. Will there be like a training for the people who apply, or what will be the process? I'm asking because I was asked by somebody and I thought it would be a good space now to get that answer, so I can forward that to the person who works in the community.
I wasn't sure. Was that kind of a compound kind of community reviewers as well as grantees? I think that's right. Did I hear that right?
If there will be a training for community reviewers, is that what you're asking, Sam?
That's what I'm asking, yes.
Okay. Maureen?
Yes. Thank you, Sam. Okay, you can hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Yes, two things that will be. One is certainly community reviewers that get assigned to do a review will have a training with the ETP staff, with Marc's staff on the specific RFP and on the scoring, the criteria and what looks like, what they're reading for, and how to do it. It's an all online process. But so when you get assigned to one, you'll do that. And like Marc talked about too, you also do another conflict of interest form, right? To just check again that you're not reviewing any organizations that you're a part of. Before that happens, though, we'll do one more information session, just like a Q&A, like what I have questions about being a community reviewer, or what should I do and what's it really like. We will do another one of those, just an info session. So it's not mandatory or anything. Your training is mandatory, right? You have to go to the training in order to be a reviewer. But so two things. We'll do an info session, and that's next Thursday. I think it's at 11. I'll find out the time. I'll put it in the chat. And there's one that's recorded on YouTube also, that's just sort of a lot of what just Marc described and what we've described as what community reviewers are. There's just an info session if people have questions. And then, yes, there is a training program for your specific what you get assigned to do.
Thank you.
Thank you, Maureen. And then I see Mohammed has his hand up. Mohammed, go ahead, please. You can unmute yourself. Thank you.
Thank you, Anissa. So thank you, Marc. So my question is to Marc. Can you hear me?
Yes.
My question is with, now for the past 2 years when we do this trainings now, we keep hearing from the community to encouraging the office to expand more training opportunity. But the thing is now, given the very short time, these 45 days in order to submit the application. So we want to start a new training track which helps the community into like IT, property maintenance. But the thing is, it's kind of hard to find business partners to come up, committed themselves to be part of this training. But we kind of 100% sure that the training is highly demanded in the community. It's needed. But the thing is now, I just want to check your flexibility toward this business, having the business partners at the time of application for any given, for African immigrant, grants or Southeast Asian or the P2P. So how is this flexibility, that do you want us to necessarily to reflect in the application process, our, potential business partners, or we can only reflect the cost, the training cost, the budget, but so in terms of, or do we have to mention the names of the employers? Kind of, if you give me more information would be great. Thank you, Marc. Thank you, Alyssa.
Sure. Thanks, Mohammed. I think it's a great question. And I would say, I would look at the Southeast Asian and the African immigrant grants a little bit different than the P2P. I would say the P2P, and I could say it, I'm thinking about my, what I can say and can't say. I would say the P2P, when you see it, if you haven't already had a chance to see it, it has a very much influence on wanting that employer engagement. That is part, and if you get a chance to go back and listen to the presentation today as well, you'll hear the team say that. I don't think that we say the same thing in the Southeast Asian and the African immigrant RFPs. So I would look at that closely when you're looking at it. Understand that doesn't mean for P2P, if you submit a grant that doesn't have a lot of employer engagement, that you won't necessarily be funded. It just means, though, that we are definitely looking for a lot of employer engagement. And the reason why, with the obvious, is we want people to go to work and we want them to be engaged. But even as you look at the three, you'll see that, particularly like number one is like the first one, which is kind of the on-ramp. There's talk about employer engagement, but we understand that that's going to be really to help folks move into employment. Whereas you look at the kind of the bridge program, which is kind of really that sector specific training, that hard skills training, that's where I would say we're really looking for that employer engagement. If I had to say anything, like those letters, that connection to the employers is really, really critical there. Again, not saying you won't be funded, but I just say that's where it's very critical for us. And then while we do speak about it in the other two grants, I don't think it'll have the same emphasis as it does on that one. So I would think about that as your right.
Thank you.
It was a great question, though.
I see, thank you, Marc. I see Dawn had posted a question. Let's see. So a potential program or grant that would assist the immigrants and refugees that are coming to the United States with various credentials, education. So foreign educated immigrants, what kind of employment opportunities they might have, and if this is something you can speak to.
Sure, thanks, Dawn. As you know, the legislature allocated some funding there so that we could work with that specific population, which we're delighted to have that pot of money there with a focus on healthcare. We are now, because this, we had direct appropriations, we have these grants we're trying to get out. This is the next wave of grants that we're going to be looking at, and we're trying to get a little bit more information from the legislature, what the legislative intent was, and so that we could actually eventually roll something out around that. Again, I think the assistant commissioner, you may be happy about that because we've had a lot of conversations around this. And so this will be the start of hopefully more of a broader approach to workforce development for our new folks coming here, so that we can create more pathways of parity versus moving people back or below what their education, the work that they were doing. Not that it's not noble, but to be parity of what they were doing before coming here. So look for that in the coming, I would say probably in the next month or so, but we will make sure we broadcast this as wide and broad as we possibly can, because it's huge and we're really excited about it. So thanks, Dawn.
Thank you so much, Marc. Yeah, that would be really cool to have. A lot of foreign educated immigrants are holding different employments just to provide for their families, and to have that opportunity for credential processes would be a great opportunity and not a waste of their talents. Exactly. Actually, there is a report that was published last year by Wilders Foundation stating that there's we're losing per our state $5.1 billion a year by not utilizing the immigrant talents we have in our state. So this is one of the ways to reach out to them and engage with them. I see that Sam had raised his hand again. Sam, go ahead, please.
Well, thank you again, Assistant Commissioner Anissa. I'm going to bring this question again and again. Some of these RFPs, they are so complex, and you understand that we have some of our local small organizations. We struggle because we struggle on how to navigate the language, and also if you look at some of these pages, they go up to 51 for one RFP. My question is, I think what Megan had said, looking at a broader approach, how can this be simplified for a person like me so that I can be able to put up a nice grant and help my community? Because I want to help my community, but just the complex of these grants, first of all, it's very confusing. And I can tell you honestly, it puts me off because I cannot be able to compete with somebody from a large organization who have been there for the last 10 years. They have resources, they have the language, they have the people. So I want to see a form of equity so that I can be able to give and be able to create a project which helps my community and also helps my community. I mean, I'm so mad. I'm so mad because it's just the complexity of these RFPs. It's annoying. I'm telling you. I mean, I'm so mad because it's annoying because you want to do the job, but you can't do it because of that complex. I mean, how can I navigate? The last time I think I was here, I said we need like grant makers from the state of Minnesota. If you can give me somebody to work with me, I can be able to navigate this grant. That will be so much help. But if I'm going to be going, I want to be going alone and write this grant and submit. It's going to be unfair because I don't think I'm going to qualify. I'm just telling you straight. It's going to be unfair. If we can have we put something fair for us through learning and as we grow on a long term, I think we can be able to put good programs for future. So we're going to need a lot of help from the state. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Sam. I think your point is appreciated and is well heard. I think that is something that we need to continue to work on. I think we've tried to make the grants RFP shorter. I think we've, since I've been here, trying to be more thoughtful about when we review RFPs and giving our reviewers more education, as Maureen spoke about. There will be that kind of initial piece, so that you can take in considerations when you kind of sometimes folks kind of look at RFPs and they're like, well, they missed a word, or they didn't say it, they didn't spell it right, or and kind of be a little bit punitive about that. We kind of want to move away from that. But I think that's also the other reason why we want community reviewers as part of the process too, because it kind of balances that out. You're going to say, well, you know what, the organization is trying to say this. They may not have said it the way you may wanted it, but I think they hit their point. And so when they get to the point when they start reviewing RFPs, that voice is important. But that doesn't neglect the point you're trying to make, which is how do we do more capacity building with our grantees? And there was some money that was allocated as direct appropriations to Propel for that exact point, to do that capacity building with folks. We could we'll get some more information. I'm not sure if Maureen's on the line still with us, but because she comes from there,
yes,
and we can get some information out to the folks so that they can contact them and find out what their process is in order to access those dollars to that capacity building. But Maureen, I'm not sure if you wanted to add anything.
Thanks, Marc, for the mention. So yes, to what you're saying, Sam, about support for organizations building up their organization or capacity, right, to be able to do this kind of thing, to do a RFP and to be successful in it. Yes, Propel Nonprofits, they're a CDFI. Kate Barr is the president, and Mario Hernandez has been running the program for this capacity building for nonprofits. And I used to work there before I worked at DEED, so it's how I know more about the program that they're doing, because I think this will be their third year. So I don't know their time frame for that, but I will put the link in the chat. It's not specific. It's not like coaching, like a specific grant writing coaching, but your organization, it's for small, culturally led and like culturally grounded nonprofits, right? Who are providing the culturally appropriate and sometimes linguistically appropriate services, that you can increase your fundraising capacity, your like partnerships capacity, your infrastructure. Groups can use it to buy hardware or software or a printer, right? Like the things you need in order to do the work. So it's a piece, again, of what you're talking about, not the specific coaching to an RFP, but it can provide more capacity for your organization. So you could hire, you can use it to hire staff or part-time staff or consultants to do some of that work with you too. So let me put a link to Propel in there. I think Marc and I are going to try to connect with them sometime in the next week or two so we can better understand their time frame and direct people there, because it is a question that I know you've been getting.
Thank you so much, Maureen. And I see that we're out of time for the day, and I appreciate Alyssa, Maureen, Marc for presenting at the forum today, and everybody who participated. If you have any more questions or any additional follow-up for information, please reach out to me. And Maureen had placed it in the chat box that on August 12th at 3 o'clock, that will be Thursday, will be the community information session about the community reviewers. Please feel free to join. And Maureen had shared her email address. Maureen, if you share the link, I'll definitely share along with the recording video. So some of you had asked for already, as well as the blog. So thank you so much. Have a great week. And thank you, Eric, for utilizing this platform and all the technical difficulties that we all face. Thank you so much for your help, and Darren also for helping with the blog notes as well. Thank you so much. Take care.